Hi, friends. Welcome to the After Party, a TSF Network podcast. This is a mixtape of fun and purposeful and encouraging content from across all the shows who are a part of our network. I'm Annie F. Downs, a co-founder of the That Sounds Fun Network.
And I'm Fallon Klug, the Director of Operations here at TSF Network. Happy Skip Day, Annie just reminded me.
Yeah, it's a leap day.
How
Happy
fun
leap
is
year,
that?
everyone.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today to celebrate on the After Party. Okay, so today's episode is from Havilah Cunnington podcast called Havilah's Podcast, appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Setting Healthy Boundaries.
In this episode, Havilah, who I adore, I have loved her for years. She's such a great teacher. She talks about setting up healthy boundaries and using clear language and the importance of writing down your internal rules of what you will and will not allow so that you stay healthy. It's a note-taking kind of episode. Don't say we didn't warn you, right, Fal? Y'all have got to have like your phone out to take notes or your notebook. It's a great note-taking episode. So let's grab your pens and let's dive in.
This week's class is all about setting healthy boundaries. Now, I've been honest with you, I had boundary issues. I was the girl that could not get her boundaries together. And when I started to learn about healthy boundaries, it was like it set my life on fire in a good way. It made everything possible that I couldn't do before. In fact, one of the biggest questions I get as a mom, and you guys know me, one of the biggest questions I get is, how do you do all that you do? And the number one answer is, I don't do everything. But what I do is I have very clear boundaries. I have clear objectives on why I do what I do, and it allows me space to be me in the middle of a really crazy life. So today we're going to talk more about setting up healthy boundaries. Now, I think boundaries is like the buzzword. Like everyone's like, I have good boundaries and don't talk to me. I've got the good boundaries. But I find people that think they have good boundaries are not necessarily those that have great boundaries. They're just kind of mean. They're the people that are really good at saying no, but they're not necessarily good at knowing why. And so I want to unpack this idea. So in our book, How to Have a Good Day by Carolyn Webb, she kind of begins this whole process by talking about this woman who worked at a firm, and she was a very busy mom. She had 4 kids. And we kind of learned through this process how she begins to have healthy boundaries. And as I'm reading this part of her story, I feel like they're reading my story. I'll never forget the time when I had 3.5 kids, and I went into my counselor and I was explaining to her that I was having a hard time leaving meetings. And she looked at me, and I thought I was going to get empathy. I thought she was going to say, well, that's so mean, and you need to tell them that they're taking advantage of you. And I felt like she might give me the way out. And what she said to me is, well, don't expect anyone to feel bad for taking time away from your family. And I said, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean by that? And she said, it's no one's responsibility to know what they're taking from you. In fact, for you to sit there and think that they should feel bad about the time they're taking from your family is not appropriate. You are the only one that's going to know what they're taking from you. She said, so you have to be unashamed in your ability to say yes and no, and to fight for the things that they're never going to know about. And it was that moment I realized that I was putting a lot of blame for exhaustion, being overwhelmed, feeling conflicted about things I had said yes to. I was expecting those around me to say, wait a minute, she has 4 kids. Wait a minute, Havilah's been at everything. Wait a minute, she's exhausted. I was expecting them to set the limits for me so that I could still feel holy, or I could still feel, worthy or productive or irreplaceable. And at the end of the day, it wasn't their responsibility. I had to show up as an adult and own my space. I think this is why, and hear me out when I say this, but I think this is why men do really well in these environments, because men often don't take care of everybody else's feelings. They're a little bit more direct, and they compartmentalize that moment into that moment, and what they can and can't do, they're very clear on. And so all of us girls, we need to get better at this. And the better we are at this, the more space we have to live really healthy lives. So one thing I think is very important is when we feel out of control or we feel exhausted or we think people are using us, the truth is it makes us feel powerful because we're blaming someone else. We're basically giving our power away. And so what I'd like to say is no one is responsible for you feeling exhausted, for you feeling overworked, for you feeling used. That was your choice. You've allowed them to do that. And so now we want you to get your power back and to find some boundaries. I kind of hear this question, well, what about if I'm living with the person that's taking taking advantage of me? Or what happens if it's my spouse? Well, we'll get to the end and we'll talk more about that. So this is really good. What they really outline in this book is it's important to write down your boundaries. Now, I could probably do this even more in my own life, but what they talk about is writing down your internal rules of what you will allow and what you will not allow. So in the storyline, what she does is she basically says, I am not going to accept a meeting before 10 a.m. or I'm not going to stay after 6 o'clock or between noon and 1, I'm always going to sit at my desk and have lunch. And so she begins to set structure around different things. And she has these eternal rules, this narrative that she lives by that helps her stay healthy. Now, I have adjusted this in our own life, and we're very clear. Now, me personally, I'll break it down for you. I do not stay out past 10 o'clock unless it's an exception. I go to bed. Another thing is I don't eat fast food. That's probably been the last 10 years. I just don't eat fast food. Do I want it? Absolutely. But I know that it doesn't help me live the way I want to live. Another thing is I don't accept events multiple nights during the week. I usually will accept 1, maybe 2 if it's like just because, but often I'll say I don't accept events during the evenings because I like a regular school week. Another thing that we've implemented in our own home for our family to create boundaries and safety and rest is we don't watch media during the week. Some of you go, well, what does that mean? I mean, like we don't watch media during the week. We don't have the TV on. We don't have iPad time. All of that is for the weekend. And so we don't, instead of navigating and negotiating an hour here, hour there, or why are you on the iPad or why are you watching the TV? We just have a no media policy during the week. And it allows us to just do other things like play with our brothers or, build Lego structures or whatever it is. Now, case in point, it may not always be that way, but for now with our littles, that's how we structure it, and it keeps us really healthy. Another thing we don't do play dates during the week. That's another thing that's kept us really well grounded. So it's great. We'll have a play date on a Friday night or all day Saturday or all day Sunday. We can connect. But during the week, our weekdays are about school, homework, getting a good night's sleep, and having a schedule. Another thing is we eat dinner together. That's just between the time of 5 and 6. We are sitting down eating dinner, and that's most nights. Another thing that we do is we don't have our kids do an activity any more than one activity a piece during each season. That way we're not running here and there. We keep it really simple. And that's just a core value that we have. I didn't want to run here and there and do a bunch of stuff. I didn't want to do that. We just do better as a family of 6 when everyone has one thing that they're focused on. It keeps us all sane. So those are kind of just basics. Now at my work, obviously I've had work hours, and when the boss expects something, well, you're within their power. And often if it's within your work hours, then that's their responsibility. It's your responsibility, right? So for me, there's certain boundaries I have for me speaking. So one of those is one of my goals and one of my boundaries is I don't come home exhausted, which means I don't go out there early. I don't leave late. I don't attend to everything. I don't go do a bunch of meals with everybody and show up at home exhausted. I found that didn't work for me. So one of my core values and one of my boundaries is I don't go home exhausted. So I keep it I take the first flight out and I take the last flight out and the first flight home. Those are my 2 rules. So as soon as I can get there, right before I have to be there, and then as soon as I can get out of there, I get out of there to get home. Those keep me really safe. Another thing is I don't do coffee dates. I know it sounds mean, but the truth is I found there were many seasons in my life I would go have coffee with somebody. And that meant I had to go get babysitting for my kids and I had to pay for that. And then I had to go get coffee and I was paying for the coffee. And then I would sit there for an hour or two and realize that me as a mom of 4 kids has a very busy life. I began to resent that person for all that it took for me to be there. And what I realized was coffee dates weren't working for me. They worked for me as a single woman. They work for me when my kids are in school, but they don't work for me when I have to pay to be there. And so I just don't do coffee dates. So when somebody asks me, will you get together and have coffee? I go, I don't do coffee dates, but gosh, I'd love to connect with you on a walk, or gosh, I'd love, in the next season of my life, reach out to me, send me a text or an email and let's connect. And so I just have really clear boundaries. So I love that idea. One thing that's very important is that we use really clear language. Remember, we talked about this last week, but when we're clear, it allows other people's brains to settle down and be more calm when we're clear. So things like, I have to leave at 6 o'clock. I have a hard exit. Like, that's my time. Or, I only have an hour. Often when I pick up the phone to talk to someone that I know might be long-winded, I'll say, listen, I only have 30 minutes and I want you to know that in about 30 minutes, I'm going to have to hang up. And I give them the boundaries of how much time I'm willing to give them. If I go and have a meeting with someone, I'll say, listen, I only have 45 minutes, so I just don't want you to be thrown off when I got to leave. And that allows them to know what they can expect from me. And it's right out there. So here's what I want to communicate today is I want you to understand the why behind the no. If you don't know why you're doing it and you just think it's what healthy people do or it's what I should do, you won't stick with it. But for me, when I understood that my why behind the no was I can't be exhausted when I get home because that doesn't make me a good mom. Or the why behind my no is I can't spend the money doing that because I want to spend the money doing this with my kids. And so you start to get your why and it makes the no a whole lot easier. Number 2, determine to follow through no matter what. Remember, if you change your no to a yes, they've reached the little boy or little girl inside of you. Now, can adults change their mind? Absolutely. If you're talking with somebody and they say something and you think, gosh, actually, that's really good information, I can change my mind, great. But if you change your mind because you feel like a child or you're concerned about how they are experiencing you, guess what? You're showing up like a child. So don't change your mind no matter what. Number 3, decide how you're going to communicate with them. One thing I've found is I do better oftentimes communicating my boundaries through an email or a text message or a voice message versus calling the person. Now, I understand some people might think that's rude, but that's not up to them. It's up to me and what I can actually pull off. And so for me, sending a quick message that gets to the point and says I can or I can't is very important. Also, it's important to use clear language. So when I'm writing a message to somebody, or maybe they don't have a lot of boundaries, I will use phrases like, I am crystal clear, or I have decided, and I keep it as short as possible. I have decided, I am crystal clear that I don't have that kind of time for you. I love you. I want nothing but the best for you. Let me know, let me know if there's anything else I can do, and be very clear. I keep it 2 or 3 sentences. I'm crystal clear that we are going to spend Saturday over at this place. We'd love to connect with you on Sunday. So be very clear. Keep it short. Keep it like clear, brief and amazing, but that's it. 6 is be as kind as possible. So something about boundaries, we assume we have to communicate them negatively or strongly. But you can be kind with a smile on your face and say, I'd love to, but I can't at this point, and stick with it. Don't change. And then number 7, communicate without using words. What I mean by that is sometimes people that don't respect your boundaries will try to engage you. And they assume that if they engage you long enough, you'll break your boundary. So one way you can communicate without words is not texting back, not picking up the phone, not showing up. You go, but that's mean. No, I've done nothing wrong. I've communicated what I can and cannot do, what I will and will not allow. And how you choose to respond is everything about you, and how I choose to respond is everything about me. And it's just anxiety getting in the way of me showing up as an adult. So be very clear. And I understand this takes practice, specifically all of us people pleasers, right? And so be very clear on what you will and what you will not allow. Another thing I think is very important is oftentimes irresponsible people will try to engage you. And so it's important to realize that you're going to say it as clear as you can, as simple as you can. And then every time they re-engage you, you're going to say the exact same thing over and over until they finally realize that you are not going to engage them, that this is your answer. You do not have to respond to every text message. You do not have to respond to every email. You do not have to respond to every DM. There is no rules about that. You have to respond to the things that are most important to you. All of you mamas of littles, can I just give you some advice? Your littles need you. It doesn't matter what everybody else needs from you. They need you. You have permission to put them first. That is not only a good idea, it is a God idea. It is godly for us to put our family first. And so take all the time you need. It is such a small window for your infants and little guys that need you. Take your time, stay rested, stay healthy. You will get to dream chase a whole lot more later. You'll get to do everything you want to do a whole lot later, but don't feel guilty for maintaining a healthy and vibrant life with your littles. You will never regret it.
Thanks for tuning in today, friends. Don't forget to visit Havilah's podcast by searching for it in your podcast app and hitting follow to listen to more episodes.
And if you've listened to a handful of our episodes here on the After Party, first, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
And also, would you mind leaving a rating so we can hear what you think about the show? We would love to know, and it helps other people find the show too. So please do that, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.